A recent study suggests that 1 in every 16 Americans has been affected by someone with narcissistic personality disorder at some point in their lives. So what causes NPD, and can it be unlearned? What causes narcissism?
There's actually a lot of pathways to this, and the city of Oz that we call narcissism. There's a lot of ways you get there. A lot of people, the big question everyone has is, are you born this way or are you made? Mm-hmm. It's mostly made, but there's a little bit of born. And
what's the percentage on that?
If I were to spitball, I'm going to go with like an 80-20 or a 90-10 in terms of made versus born. I mean, the inborn part is that, because the fact of the matter is, we see people come from invalidating early environments or overindulged or spoiled early environments, and they don't turn out narcissistic. So there's got to be something else at play, right? And that's probably where that temperamental piece comes in. Kids who are likely more hypersensitive, hyper-emotional. If you look at Marsha Linehan's work on borderline personality disorder, she actually talks about that mix between the biological vulnerability plus the invalidation of the early environment. There's likely something like that happening in narcissism too, but it's mostly made. So let's view it as almost concentric circles, and let's start at the middle circle, okay, which is really what happens in the family when the child is first growing up. Children who don't get consistent emotional mirroring from their parents, that's a setup for becoming a narcissist later on. Because that's how children learn to regulate their emotional worlds. They learn how to self-soothe their emotions. They learn how to take responsibility for their emotions. They learn how to understand their emotions from how they're mirrored by their parents. And if their parents have consistent, appropriate reactions and are available to them, that's how the child learns that. So if a child, for any number of reasons, doesn't have that kind of consistent feedback from their parents, the parents are distracted, the parents are absent, the parents don't care, the parents are addicted to drugs and are not available in that way, all of those could be contributors to that. Parents just are abusive in some way. Obviously, that can be a contributor too to inconsistent kinds of mirroring. And then the child doesn't learn, like I said, to sort of regulate their own emotion. They keep looking to the environment for validation because frankly, they're confused. We also think about narcissism in the early environment as a function of attachment. Children who have secure, healthy attachments tend to go on to adulthood and make more secure, healthy attachments. But kids who have more anxious or avoidant attachments, that can set the tone for attachment issues in adulthood, and they're not able to make those kinds of successful attachments in adulthood. So their relationships are really fraught with lots of in and out, back and forth, rather than the consistency you'd see from a secure attachment with a parent. The other thing I often say is that parents who create narcissistic kids who go on to become narcissistic adults, we see a pattern of simultaneous overindulgence and underindulgence. And what I mean by that is these are the kids where if they do the sport their parent wants, or get the straight A's, or the prima ballerina dancer, or whatever it is they do, the best violin player, whatever, or they want to take over dad's business, whatever the thing they say they want to do, if the parents can get a good public face from it, they will overindulge the kid in that way. They'll drive them to every practice. They'll go out of their way. But when that child has an emotional need that needs to be met, the parents are nowhere to be found. Like, they're interested when their kid's on stage, they're interested when their kid's on the field, they're interested when the child's getting an honor or doing what they want them to do. But when that kid really needs their emotional needs to be met, it's completely an impoverished environment. That's what I mean by being over and underindulged. It's also what we call modeling. It's what they see in their environment. If they watch a parent constantly be entitled, they're going to learn to be entitled. If they watch a parent who has no empathy, they're not going to learn empathy. Empathy is learned in childhood. You cannot teach a 30-year-old how to be empathic. That's an early game.
So that was my question, because if you were saying that 80 to 90% of becoming a narcissist was taught, then certainly later we could unteach it. But we can't.
No, because you know what ends up happening is that ultimately these environments for children are inconsistent. They're invalidating. At the worst of it, they can be abusive and dehumanizing. Right. And that's the heartbreak, is that I've worked with more than a few folks who are adult narcissists who did come from abusive, invalidating, downright dehumanizing
who have
homes.
Narcissistic personality disorder.
Who have narcissistic personality disorder. So their early lives were really, really sort of wretched. And that's heartbreaking, but that's still not a get out of jail free card for treating other people badly. Like I'm not down with that. And so, but now let's take that. Now we're in the family, but we got to push this out a little bit. Society is to blame too. We tell kids it's okay at some level to behave. As long as you win, you got into Harvard Junior, great, whatever it took to get there. As long as we start saying that you can shelve important qualities like compassion, kindness, respect, mutuality, empathy, as long as you're telling people it's okay to put that stuff away, as long as you succeed, our achievement-oriented culture is a contributor to these patterns for sure. Because we're almost saying empathy is a waste of time as long as you get straight A's. You know, who needs kindness when you can write code? That's not gonna fly. You know, so that's the other reason we're seeing more and more of this. And then you add things like social media and the kinds of things society values into the mix. Then that's it. I mean, it's a perfect storm. That's what I'm saying. You got the family, you've got the community, you've got the culture at large, and then you have a little bit of individual temperament thrown in there. Forget about it.
When you hear how narcissism is conditioned, I'm surprised that it's only 1 to 3% of the population that has it.
Remember, that's narcissistic personality
disorder,
which requires that person to have had problems in their life because of it, awareness of it, and feel like it's caused them trouble. Because narcissism works as a pattern in our society too often, they don't feel a lot of distress.
So when you were talking about parents mirroring or kids mirroring their parents, there are certain behaviors that I grew up with, right, and my parents that I did until my mid-20s, and then I thought, I'm not going to do this anymore. This is not healthy for me. It's not nice. I'm not going to do it. And so I changed. So why is it that I can change an undesirable behavior, but someone who has narcissistic personality disorder can't change?
Because the core conflict is that insecurity, that discomfort with themselves, that sense of emptiness. That's what has to be addressed. So you may have seen that, but it clearly didn't result in that kind of core insecurity perhaps in you. So when you were doing the yelling, it's like, well, this is how it's done. And you're like, whoa, maybe this other person feels sad when I'm yelling at them. This isn't okay. So you were able to have that correction because A, you were able to engage in empathy, and B, you may not have had that core insecurity. Remember, the narcissist is absolutely reliant on the world for validation at all times. When we need someone, we resent them. You know, a child doesn't, but the child grows. You think about an adolescent. Every adolescent out there resents their parents. Why do they resent their parents? Because they kind of still need them. They kind of still need them to be a mom, but like, I want you to be my mom. I don't want you to be my mom. And they go back and forth, and then they hate you. You know, so it's that resentment comes from need. And it's one thing to be 5. Of course you need your parents. That's built in. But when you're 35, 45, and you need people to tell you you're great all the time, you may not be aware of that need, but you are aware that you're reliant on the world. And that if you're having a bad day, that the only way to spring out of it is to get validation from the world. That stinks. So that's why it's very difficult to change. It's not just about modeling empathy. And there is an interesting concept out there, and it's something actually even in my social media, someone that we've engaged on about this idea of cognitive empathy. You can teach people, like, that's how he feels. Okay, got it. Do you understand why that would feel bad? Got it. That's almost intellectualized, and it's a little bit different than being in the emotional muck with someone.
Is it like acting?
It's not. No, it's not acting. It's knowing, but it's not getting. You see what I'm saying?
No,
I know why this person would feel upset right now. I know that. Might even get it a little bit, but I'm not feeling it so much so that it'll stop my behavior in the future. So it's like a half of a fix. And when you're really in a close, intimate relationship with someone, and the best they can come up with is like, I suppose I understand why you feel that way, but they're still not like, and they're not emotionally there with you. That's incredibly unsatisfying.
It's kind of like when somebody says, well, I'm sorry if you feel that way.
Yes, narcissist mantra.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
That's not an apology.
That's not an apology, exactly.
You have been in a relationship with a narcissist?
Myself, yes, of course.
Okay.
In different areas too. Intimate relationships, familial relationships, work relationships, but just so all of MedCircle knows, it's not my ex-husband. He's actually a great guy.
We love the ex-husband.
Yeah, we love my ex-husband.
So, because I'm curious, because if 80 to 90% is taught, were you hyper aware raising your kids to not raise a narcissist?
My ex-husband and I, when we were raising our kids, the one thing we 100% agreed upon, he's like, Ramani, we have a lot of things we have to get right, but we looked at each other and said, the one thing we must make sure we focus on above all else, because we only get one chance to get this right, is empathy. We didn't care how they did in school. We didn't care if they didn't eat their vegetables. We didn't care if they watched television 10 hours a day. We just needed them to be empathic. And there was that fine day when they were about 8 or 9 years old. I'm like, no, we got it.
Hold on, I have so many questions. Was your ex-husband a mental health professional? Yeah. Okay, so you have...
Yeah, it's not
so
like...
these kids have two like
Shoemaker's
world-renowned
children.
mental health experts parenting them, and the two of you both agreed that empathy was number one.
Empathy is everything.
This is huge for parents to get.
It's huge, because I'll tell you, it's the core of why kids bully. All the problems we have with kids, it has to be about empathy. Am I telling you my kids have had the most smooth ride? No one's kids are. I mean, and they're horribly mean to me because they're teenagers. But I will say that I can see in their face when they go one line too far as a teenager and they say that one mean thing and they see my face change, immediately. The empathy overtakes them quicker than their words do. Their face changes. I've watched my daughters interact with people, and I'll watch how quickly their face will change when they sense another human being in need. And at those points, I do heave that sigh of relief. Whatever path they take, I do know that they're hyper aware of, not hyper aware like in a neurotic way, but they're very aware of the needs and the feelings of other people, and they will shape their behavior in that way. And that was the only thing that mattered, because I wanted to put two decent, kind human beings into the world.
That's really beautiful. I bet if I lined up 100 parents and asked them, if you could only give your kid one thing, what would it be? I don't think one of them would say empathy.
That's terrible, because I'll tell you, the world has enough smart people. And it turns out they do well in school, but if I had to choose, if somebody said, you could give up your kid getting into like a top college or something and trade that out for empathy, I'd be like, hell no.
Empathy.
She could go, I don't care what she does, but I would not let her give that up.
Because parents are concerned they're sharing, kindness, being honest, diligent, hardworking. I've never heard empathy.
Yeah, it was everything, the way I raised them. In fact, even how I breastfed my kids, I'm like, I'm going to stare at them face to face. I'm never going to be distracted as much as I can. In the middle of the night, I would fall asleep. Yeah. I would stare at them face to face. Like, I started that one early. I'm like, I'm mirroring these kids.
That was that important to you and your husband.
It was that important to me. It was that important.
Guys, this is huge for the parents out there getting that, because this is the leading expert on narcissism and a lot of other mental health topics, and her ex-husband both have that shared goal.
Yeah, it had to be narcissism. I mean, it had to be, It had to be empathy for us, because I think that's the pay it forward. That's going to make them better mothers. It's going to make them better partners. It's going to make them better workers. It's going to make them better leaders. It's going to make them better friends. They win everywhere on that one. That's the only quality to me that matters in a human being. And so from there, all other things would be built out, whatever they do.
Now, you briefly mentioned that around the age of 8 or 9, there was a moment that you said, they got it. What was that?
I was actually watching my daughter play with another child, and then something happened with what the child was eating or interacting with, and so that child no longer had that thing, and my daughter still had it. It might have been like ice cream or something fell out of a dish.
Oh, okay.
And her face, you could see that she experienced that child's feeling before that child experienced their feeling. And you could see the hurt in her face. And then she's like, we have to help them. And I'm like, oh, sweetie, don't worry about it. I think she was worried about the cost. And she was even being empathic. She knew I was struggling a little financially at that point, and to buy another ice cream was going to cost money. And she's like, is it going to be okay to get them another? I said, of course, sweetheart. And then we ameliorated the situation and got a new ice cream. But her caring for me having enough money, that child suffering, it was like, it really, and she was to me like, should I cut mine in half? But I already put my germs in it. The way a kid thinks. Yeah. It was absolutely automatic for her. And, and we were very lucky. Our children went to an infant care center, actually at UCLA, where empathy was the main thing taught to them all day long. So you can build this into caregiving models of, and I think that started in infant care. It was in their preschools. It was in their K through, maybe it's in high school. It gets harder. But it's, we'll see how it goes for them. Like I said, as teenagers, it doesn't always feel like empathy, but I see it with their friends. Everyone but me. And I'm fine with that.
For now. Yeah. They'll become your friends later. So 8 or 9 years old, you saw these empathetic traits.
Even earlier, but then it was clicked in. It was automatic for them. Yeah.
When do people start to exhibit signs of narcissism?
Here's where we need to be careful. almost by definition, all teenagers look narcissistic.
Yes.
They're deeply entitled.
course.
They're arrogant. They think they know everything.
What's the type of narcissist I compared them to?
For them, you would call them maybe more the benign narcissist.
The benign narcissist,
And
yeah.
I think that's what it is. It is more of the benign narcissism. And I think like that's why I'd be very loath to use that term with an adolescent. I always say that adolescence is like wearing a sweater that's way too big for them. They're just growing into their personalities. They're trying to figure it all out. Their bodies are changing. The world treats them like an adult for 1 hour, as a child for another hour.
Totally.
So it's just hard to be a teenager. It really, really is. And it's hard to interact with a teenager. So that combination means like we're just trying to put a label on it all. So I say don't even use that word with adolescents, even though the pattern seems to fit. I wouldn't start really sort of saying, this pattern's making me super uncomfortable, probably until their early 20s. Like it's really in place and they haven't kind of grown out of it, whether they've gone to college or military service or like trained in a job or something. Some of that should be correcting at that point. And that's where I would really, really look for it in earnest. But I would still look for some of the key issues, that they are empathic as adolescents when they need to be. They may not be to the parents, but they should be with their friends and other folks in their purview. You know, are they really entitled? Do they really believe they deserve special treatment? Or, you know, kids making noise in a restaurant, sure, that's going to happen. But like a kid walking up and saying, hey, why should I have to wait in line? You know, I'm too important. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was such a wonderful explanation of causes, and also some beautiful parenting advice.
Well, thank you.
Amazing. Really, really good.
I appreciate that.
I'm excited to keep this series going. In our next episode, according to Dr. Ramani, there are 7 signs to look out for when spotting a narcissist. We're going to go through those one by one.